What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Nick 4K video. Today we're checking out a video from Stop the FOMO, and his video is titled HDR Paradox. Dimmer movies 10 years later, what happened to HDR? Let's check it out.
The biggest blockbusters of 2025, F1 the movie, Superman, and Jurassic World Rebirth all have one thing in common. They all look dim. I'm talking about specular highlights barely crossing 300 nits on one of those movies. The other two movies, well, one of them didn't cross 200 nits, and the other one barely broke 100 nits. Actually, I don't think it ever broke 100 nits. Isn't that SDR? While today's entry-level TVs can handle 1,000 nits, with flagships easily pushing over 3,000 nits. And Hollywood's newest, latest reference monitor, the Sony BVM3110, was designed specifically for HDR content, handling peak specular highlights of 4,000 nits. And yes, it was used to grade the movie F1. As a matter of fact, F1 was one of the first releases to ever use this monitor. And so here's the paradox. TV makers keep raising brightness level for HDR content, while the actual studios that make HDR content have gone the other way and lowering the HDR brightness. What gives? Today, we're gonna break it down. Now, before you say creators' intent was to keep things dim, this is why I chose the three movies I did. They were bright, punchy blockbuster movies, not human interest dramas. So let's take a look at these movies and you tell me if you're not surprised by how dim they are.
Okay, so real quick, based off of what this says, I guess he's going off like the digital versions of these movies, but I don't know if they're the same as like an actual physical copy. From what I can tell you so far, I haven't seen F1 yet, so I can't really base that off the 4K yet. But I can tell you this: Superman on 4K Blu-ray looks good. Could have been a little more brighter, sure, but I think it still looked pretty good on the Blu-ray. Maybe the streaming is different / digital. That's a different story. Now, when it comes to Jurassic World Rebirth, I have noticed that the picture does seem a little more dimmer than I was expecting, especially compared to, I feel like Jurassic World's 4K HDR, the Jurassic World from 2015, that 4K's HDR looks really good. And I was surprised to see just how dim Jurassic World Rebirth was. And I was actually wondering as I was watching it, was it my player that was doing it? Or was it that the Dolby Vision itself wasn't correct? I don't know what it was. It definitely did seem like it could have been a little more brighter, especially when they're chasing the mosasaur in the water. In that scene specifically, I was kind of expecting like my eyes to kind of like get blown out by it, right? Because sometimes you're watching an HDR movie and like it'd be a dark scene and all of a sudden it's bright and your eyes are like, oh man, it takes a couple seconds to adjust, which is cool. I know technically that's probably not the way that movies are supposed to be viewed, but I kind of like when they do that to me because it's like, real brightness. I like it. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I like it. But yeah, I definitely noticed with Jurassic World Rebirth that there are some issues. And with Superman seemed fine. I can't really judge F1. But I did hear from people who watched F1, people think that the colors are a little muted, as if they purposely decrease the HDR effect when it comes to not necessarily the lighting part of it, but the color part of it, to make it feel more realistic, which I guess that's what they're kind of going for with this movie, so I guess that's understandable. I personally can't judge it for myself, but I could understand if maybe someone was watching this movie, it said it had HDR, you're expecting the whole, big shebang, colors popping, lights flashing, and it just looks like an SDR film. I get that. So I think that's what he's gonna say, but I could be wrong. But yeah, when it comes to Superman, I thought it looked pretty good, but that's just my opinion.
Movies, and you tell me if you're not surprised by how dim they are. So we'll start with F1 the movie, right? This had potential. First, it was announced that they would be using the BVM3110 to grade it, so HDR showcase. Second, lots of good night scenes with bright lights, and then during the day you got shiny chrome. There's potential for this to be quite a splashy action movie. You're visiting all the different F1 venues, right? Nighttime races. And at the end, I'm thinking this is going to be real exciting, especially after watching the trailer. Oh, I cannot wait. And by the way, I saw this movie twice. I liked it that much, so I couldn't wait for the home release. And then I got it, and then disappointment. The brightest scenes never broke 200 nits. I was thinking, wait, 200 nits. I mean, you got the sun in Abu Dhabi. The sun in Abu Dhabi didn't break 200 nits. You have the irony, right? You have Brad Pitt squinting into the sunrise in Baja at the end of the movie, and the chrome shining off of that sun. He's squinting against 200 nits. 200 nits is not worth squinting at, but apparently they could have done this movie on the old BVM 310, right? The one that was capable of 1,000 nits. Why did they go out and get a 4,000 nit capable monitor when they were planning to grade it at no more than 200 nits? Next up is another action blockbuster, Jurassic World Rebirth. You have
Maybe it's one of those cases where it's like a newer technology that who's ever running it doesn't exactly know 100% how to do it yet. So he's just trying his best. F1 is a massive film for a lot of people. They're calling it like the Top Gun Maverick of, I think it's actually filmed by the same director who made, or the same cinematographer who made Top Gun Maverick. And Top Gun Maverick was a massive deal. So like F1's supposed to be like that of this year, or the Oppenheimer of this year, like this big epic movie. And it's unfortunate to see that maybe they had the wrong person in charge when it comes to the physical media release. That stinks. And maybe it's not just the physical media release, obviously, because, he's using the streaming or the digital versions of these films. So I guess it would also be the digital version too. So I don't know, maybe they can go back and fix it. At least the digital version get updated, but the physical boys were kind of screwed, I guess, huh?
bright neon lights, explosions, dinosaurs, perfect HDR material. Instead, the brightest moments, although brief, are capped at 300 nits. I mean, look at these scenes, right? You have the neon lights in a refrigerator. Even this scene where everyone thought would have the most impact, all under 400 nits, maybe just above 300, maybe. I felt that this movie was mastered for an entry-level OLED TV. Another explosive action movie this summer.
Okay, so I want to go back to the Jurassic World one real quick. So, what I'll say about the nighttime shots, the nighttime shots look good. He didn't really talk about it much, but like it's the daytime beach shots, like when they're outside, when they're on the boat hunting the mosasaur, like I said earlier, it's not bright enough. And I feel like if something's not bright enough and you're trying to go for the HDR effect, what it does is it kind of pulls you out of the movie, if that makes sense. So like HDR is supposed to give more of like a natural, deeper color, deeper brightness. And so when you have that extra brightness, you're like, okay, I'm in the experience. I'm here with the characters. However, when you have like a false brightness, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, I'm just watching a movie. Like, I don't know, it kind of pulls you out a little bit. And that might just be me though. I have felt that before while watching a movie where the HDR wasn't perfect, or I shouldn't say perfect, but it wasn't up to par. I felt that before, so I understand where he's coming from with that too. But as far as nighttime shots go, I think the nighttime shots were good, but that's just, I have an OLED, so it's one of those things where like even a rough looking HDR 4K is still pretty good looking on OLED, right? So that's just the way it is.
For an entry-level OLED TV. Another explosive action movie this summer was Superman by James Gunn. And sadly, and this is the worst one, HDR highlights never exceeded 100 nits. All these scenes, bright laser eyes, explosions, right? Fire, 100 nits. It's as if they took the theater version and then just gave it to us as a home release without trying to regrade it for HDR. Here's the sad part.
So like I said earlier, I actually thought it looked good. But like I said, I have an OLED, right? So it's just one of those things where OLED is kind of cheating whenever you watch anything. So as far as like maybe for like a projector, it probably wouldn't look as good or anything like that, but I thought it looked fine. But then again, when it comes to Superman, I wasn't necessarily looking at the brightness, I was looking at more of the colors. I guess it depends on the movie. I know that Superman had like more of an orangey and blue color coding to it, and so the world of Superman is supposed to be reminiscent of our normal Earth, but also its own universe at the same time. And so I was kind of okay with the different color schemes and the way that the film felt, because it's a different universe that's similar, right? So I was kind of okay with that. But I get it, like especially if you are a massive, like, I am an HDR guy 100%, I want the best of the best, I could see how that could be, disappointing.
James Gunn did Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Guess what? That movie actually had punchier HDR, hitting above 600 nits, right? In these scenes, these are over 600 nits. And so you'd think, wait, James Gunn knows how to use HDR. But in this movie, he pulled it back to SDR. 100 nits, my friend, is SDR. Was this intended to be an
Oh
SDR
wow.
movie? I don't get it. So he definitely has walked backwards on HDR. Was this a studio decision or was it James Gunn's decision? Either way, I think it made Superman less of a blockbuster in terms of visual impact
Hmm.
as it could have been. And the irony gets better. Nicholas Hoult, who plays Lex Luthor, the villain in Superman, which we can describe as the dimmest modern HDR movie ever made. Well, he was part of the brightest HDR movie ever made. Yes, he was in Mad Max Fury Road. Look at these scenes that he was a part of. Literally 3,000 nits, if not more, one after the next. And yet, he's now cast in a movie that, well, for all intents and purposes, it's not even HDR, although it claims to be HDR. And so you're wondering, what is happening here? Not only are the movies not bright enough, they're getting dimmer over time.
Hmm.
So here are the reasons that have been given. The creative intent was limited to the theater screens, right? Movie theaters, they're limited to 100 nits, if not less, right? So Dolby Cinema, around 100 nits, IMAX, lower, and modern theaters that are not Dolby Cinema are even less bright than that. We're talking maybe 40 or 50 nits. So with all that in their minds, directors are thinking, okay, we don't need to go higher than 100 nits for a modern theater that claims to do HDR. And then when it comes time to do the home release, the director is done. He's not part of the process anymore. So that's one reason. The second one is fear of consumer complaints. Oh no, the consumers will complain bright 2000 nit content will wash out their TV. No, it won't. We're talking peak specular highlights. We're talking tiny little flashes here and there. The entire screen isn't 2000 nits. No TV can handle that, right? We're talking little things that look realistic. 0.5% window, 1% window at most. I think your TV will handle that without the consumer complaining, oh, it's too bright. Let's look at that Mad Max Fury Road scene again. Most of this scene is under 80 nits. It's that one bright part that hits 3000 nits, and it's only brief. It's only flashes, and yet it's very effective. Filmmakers know what they're doing. Now, this next reason might be more realistic. Industry inertia, meaning the entire production pipeline, from color grading to production, all of that has SDR in mind. And so to properly do it in HDR, literally you have to create a different pipeline. And if you don't, well, it's not going to be done properly. And I think there's a certain logic to that that makes sense. And yet we've had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, over 600 nits, Mad Max Fury Road, easily 3,000 nits or more, two movies that have proven these reasons to be, well, if you don't have the budget, you don't have the budget, but it's there. The HDR pipeline is there. So
Hmm.
you can't say, well, we're so used to creating for SDR, we don't know how to do HDR. Then you have the CGI excuse with the green screens and the VFX. So if it's too bright, you might see the seams, right? So when you make it dimmer, it's easier to hide the seams, and all that special effects is less special effects and looks realistic. But yet, Guardians of the Galaxy 2
Yeah,
and
no.
Mad Max Fury Road, in those brightest scenes, let's face it, that's all CGI. And it worked well, and I didn't see any seams. I know they can do it, which leads me to what I think is really happening. Why has Hollywood not gone brighter, but gone dimmer? And the reason is, I think they don't think consumers notice. It
That's
costs
probably
more
what
money
it
to
is.
make HDR,
Yeah.
right? Once you do one version for the movie theaters, which is 100 nits at best, then you have to do a home release version. Well, you're going to have to put a whole team together to do HDR properly, talk to the director. The director is done. You have to call him back into the grading room to say, hey, let's make a home release that has HDR impact. It's all like, why do you need HDR impact? I think it's impactful enough, right? And so this costs money. And they're like, well, if consumers don't notice, why do anything at all? And that's the key. These
Exactly.
movies all look great, by the way, but I'm trying to tell you, the HDR impact isn't there. And the theaters, or rather the studios, are hoping you don't notice there's no HDR impact. And if you do, and you don't like it, what? You're not going to buy the movie? And so they have a captive audience that really can't do anything about it. But you
And don't forget, a lot of what the studios look at, like they make 4Ks obviously, because 4Ks and Blu-rays, that's still a big part of the market. Like they're 50% now, you know. So a lot of studios look more at like, hey, DVDs are what really sell, right? There's the extra, like if you're a collector, you get Blu-ray. If you're like an extra, you know, unique, elite collector, you're gonna get a 4K, you know. So it's one of those things where like, that's cool. Here's that option for you, but we're also not really making the physical media for you. We're making the physical media for the DVD boys, because 50% of all physical media sales is DVD still. So it is one of those things where like 4K and Blu-ray are slowly starting to beat the DVD back. I think actually they just overtook it. I think they're like 52% from what I've seen last time. I think things could still change, obviously. Maybe it's better. But it's one of those things where like Blu-ray and 4K sales are starting to match DVD sales. So people are coming around to the actual 4K format. They're learning more about it. They're liking the HDR. They're liking the 4K. They're liking the OLED. You know, and OLEDs are becoming cheaper. And I think it's one of those things where like, it's hard to believe in the next evolution of technology until you experience it yourself. I mean, sure, you can look at it and be like, okay, that's pretty cool. But until you actually like, you know, go to a store and you're looking at an OLED and you're like, wow, like this is crazy. You know, you can look on a YouTube all day and it looks cool, but until you actually experience for yourself and you're like, wow, this is what OLED is. This is what I've been missing. People start kind of picking it up and going with the tech, especially when that amazing tech you just saw at a store gets cheaper and you can actually start affording it. And we're going to start seeing that more expand and expand. And of course, you want to be able to have that amazing tech and push it to its limits. You go to streaming. Okay, this streaming, I can see the rubber banding. I can see the, you know, the light flashes. This doesn't look good. Let me get physical, you know, and you get physical, you get the best version of a movie. So it's one of those things where like we're getting to the point where 4K and Blu-ray are starting to take over the DVD space or the physical media movie space, but DVD is still the 50% of the market. And with DVD, you don't need all the extra bells and whistles. So effectively what they're doing is they're making the DVD and then they're going to make the 4K from that same DVD. You know what I'm saying? So of course then add HDR. But it's one of those things where the studios are making the movies for the movie theater to make a lot of money, and then they're going to have it for streaming, and that can just be like, you know, the 4K version, which we know a 4K streamed movie is not the same as a 4K physical. The bitrate is completely different. So they're really making stuff for streaming. And then of course, obviously there is the physical. And like I said, I make more money off the DVDs. I'm going to prioritize DVDs. I'll still give the Blu-ray and the 4K option, but I'm not going to go 100% into the blue and especially the 4K if I know I'm not making as much money from those. So that's pretty much what the studios are thinking. Obviously, sometimes the director does stick around and finish up his work. And I do kind of find it a little funny, but also a little sad that like these movies are making hundreds of millions of dollars and you couldn't even hire the director to come back for like a week or two just to kind of nail down the HDR for the official release. It's just kind of, it's disappointing. So I can completely understand why people are also not just disappointed, but also kind of mad. I guess just like being greedy and not really thinking about all the consumers and only just like the DVD boys. So that's my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
You can do something about it. So let's go to practical considerations. How does this affect you? Well, at the end of the day, the reason why you're buying the brightest and the best, with the brightest being a key word, is because you're getting ready for HDR content. Well, the studios don't care about making HDR HDR, then why should you care? Best to take that premium you would have paid for a brighter TV and get a larger TV. For example, right, I'm going to take my Editor's Choice TV of the Year, the TCL QM6K. At 65 inches, it's like less than $600, right? Great TV, great price, 65 inches. Normally, if you said to me, hey, I got a bit more money, should I get the QM8K? Should I upgrade to an even brighter Hisense, or maybe get an OLED? You know what my response would be? If you have $600, get the 65-inch, but you have another $1,400, let's say $2,000, don't get a brighter TV. Get a larger QM6K. It comes in a 98-inch for $2,000. And so now you're getting the immersion. You don't need the extra brightness because HDR movies are capped anyway. And by the time the studios get caught up and say, you know what, let's make HDR movies more impactful. It may be 2035, right? There's no predicting. It may never happen. And that's another thing. I can't assume the studios will ever make a bright movie ever again. Because why? It costs more money. It doesn't get people into the theaters, obviously, because the theaters can handle 100 nits only. And so at the end of the day, you're going to buy and download and stream the movies, not because it's bright, but because you like the movie. And so they're thinking, wait, why are we beating ourselves up to make it more HDR impactful when it doesn't have to be? And so that leaves us as consumers buying TVs that are bigger, not brighter. You know, image quality in terms of image processing is important, right? So that's a consideration, but it doesn't have to be brighter anymore. And so at the end of the day, all these dim modern HDR blockbusters, what they tell us is the trend is not good. I used to keep thinking, you know, patience, right? I mean, it was so exciting. In 2018, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was over 600 nits. I mean, Mad Max was what, 2015, 2016? 3,000 nits. In a matter of time, all movies would get brighter. I did not expect 10 years later, the movies would get dimmer in HDR. Action movies, right? And so now, my conclusion is, we've all been misled. The HDR hype was that hype.
All right, awesome video there. Stop the FOMO. It's one of those things where for me, when I buy a 4K, I'm not really picking the 4K over the Blu-ray because of resolution. I mean, obviously the 4K bump is always better. That's just one of those things. It's nice to have that extra resolution, but it's really not the resolution for me. It is the HDR. I really like that HDR effect when it comes to certain movies, and it is really disappointing when these massive studios have big hits, Superman, Jurassic World, Rebirth, F1, and they don't invest a little bit more money into the actual home releases of them. It is disappointing for sure. What do you guys think? Do you think HDR is getting worse, or do you think it's getting better? Let me know in the comments below. I think a lot of people mostly just think like Dolby Vision is kind of like the fix to this, and I do think that with Dolby Vision 2 coming out, that could actually be one of those things where, like, because it's AI powered, it could also be like, hey, here is this really fast, cheaper option for studios to do now. So you don't have to necessarily pay a whole team to do this. The Dolby Vision 2 will instantly just take care of all of the HDR for you, make it the perfect version. That would be pretty cool if done right. So I guess we'll see. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn notifications for more videos, and to check out any more of my videos that are right here on the screen. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later. Peace.